On today's World Insight, upbeat global financial markets as China and the U.S. wrap up their initial trade talks. Though some worries persist, the relief over tariffs remains uncertain. So what's the overall outlook on the world economy? What are the key takeaways from the China-U.S. discussions?
Welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The two-day high-level meeting between China and the United States on economic and trade affairs wrapped up on Monday. It achieved a significant consensus and witnessed the announcement of a joint statement from both sides. The outcomes have drawn widespread attention from the international community. WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala described it as a turning point in global trade. Financial markets surged both on Monday and Tuesday, with stocks rallying and the dollar strengthening to a certain extent. However, reactions were mixed. For example, EU policymakers welcomed progress, but also wondered if the relief might be temporary before new tariffs, while some experts warned against overhyping a possible market rebound. So, what tangible impacts will this milestone bring to the global economy? How much? For how long? What signals does this send about the future trajectory of China-U.S. economic and trade relations? Let's bring in our panelists. I'm glad to be joined by John Quelch, Executive Vice Chancellor and American President with Duke Kunshan University, Da Wei, Director of the Center for International Security and Strategy with Tsinghua University, Zhu Jiandong, Unigroup Chair Professor at the PBC School of Finance with Tsinghua as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. I'm so glad to be joined by a very strong panel. Now, from what has been announced by both sides, China and the United States, early in the week, what do you think is the priority now after the consensus were being announced by both sides? Professor Da Wei.
I think now we had achieved quite or changed the momentum by the by what we have seen during the weekend by the two sides. I think it's very good. So I hope we can continue this momentum. And two things I think for me as priorities. One is I hope because the two sides said they set up kind of working mechanism that have continuous dialogue. I hope they can continue their work. They can have frequent conversation between the two sides. This is probably the only mechanism that between the two countries can talk to each other very effectively. The other thing is I do hope that we can make some breakthrough regarding the fentanyl issue. I think this is something for me. I hope we can make a breakthrough early. Maybe by working together, we can cut at least a part of if not the whole 20% of the fentanyl tariff. I think to maybe to zero or maybe to a lower level. I think that's something doable in a short run. So to create or to continue current positive development.
So momentum, mechanism, and further reduction of the tariffs, so-called quote-unquote the phantom tariff. Let's go to you, Professor Zhu. You are a global trade expert. What do you think is the priority now?
The priority actually is go to 90 days negotiations. Actually, we now enter into 90 days negotiations. So we just stop the tariff escalations. That's the achievement we have now. So we go to 90 days, and we needed to go to a reasonable tariff agreements. Right now, these 30% tariffs, Trump 2, and plus 20% tariff of Trump 1. Which is 50%. It's way too high. Basically, I don't really think there's much difference between 50% or 100%. It's still very, very high tariffs for the China, and then from China side, it's about 30%. So we needed to reach a reasonable agreement for both sides in order to have reasonable the trade. Otherwise, the market will not believe it. So market, it's kind of just stop, panic, but wait to see.
Okay, I see real negotiations only begin now, if there are. And it's important that we understand how big the tariff still is for both sides. Okay, let's go to you, Professor Quell.
Well, I think 4 days ago, President Trump was quoted as saying that 80% would be a good number. So to have achieved what was achieved in Geneva, which is significantly below 80%, has the markets in a state of temporary euphoria. But I think the devil is in the details here, and additional progress has to be made in terms of the global tariff rate coming down below 50%, as mentioned. But in addition, the devil is in the details, both in terms of industry-specific tariffs, but also in terms of the non-tariff issues that relate to market access, which in his latest comments, President Trump has emphasized. And we only have 90 days to achieve all of that, which is very, very challenging.
All of you are talking from a policy perspective. What about businesses, small and medium-sized companies on both sides, importers, exporters? They are going to rush to store up their inventory, rush to talk to their earlier clients, and try to ship as much as possible. But the cost of the ships are going to be up because there's great competition. And meanwhile, you are also going to see global companies. Are they going to invest or not invest? Are they going to think about a forever changed supply chain? Or they can rely on earlier practices? What does that mean for all different kinds of stakeholders? Sorry, my question is long, but it's very important that we look at all these stakeholders.
So investors are going to pretty much stay on the sidelines until they see what is going to happen in the next 90 days. Regarding small and medium-sized businesses, not all of these businesses have the capital to invest in forward loading of inventory. And so it's not necessarily the case that they have the flexibility to respond to the latest reductions. But I do think an important point needs to be made, that where there is uncertainty, as there is at the moment, still, then the supply chain disruptions continue, and it adds cost to the end consumer when companies are not able to predict their demand and supply flows. You mentioned shipping costs, but in addition, there are warehouse distribution costs that have to be covered when product goes from China to the United States in advance of demand and has to be warehoused at some cost to the consumer eventually.
Yes, let me first though say the Trump administration actually confused the long-range target versus a short-range target. So they want to reduce this long-range dependence on China, but that sounds whatever they think this is a reasonable plan. However, what they do, they wanted to reach this long-range target immediately. That's impossible. They confuse global value chain reform versus a global value chain disruption. They actually change this reform, turns out to be the disruption. So what we want to, market will actually teach a lesson for these people. I hope this the Trump administration can learn from these market reactions. Actually, even if they really want to decouple from China, they needed to do gradually. So this kind of tariff increase sharply only create a panic, doesn't help at all. Second of all, market is waiting to see if these guys can give a reasonable plan, not just number imagined from these people. They need a reasonable plan. The market can react to the gradually. Otherwise, I think the market will react again.
We earlier in history heard about shock therapy, Professor Da Wei as a political scientist. And this time, some term it already as tariff therapy. Whatever it is called, what do you think is the practice being used now? How would you describe what really happened?
Yeah, that's a very interesting term. I mean, if it's a tariff therapy or it's a shock therapy, I mean, we need to understand what is what's your diagnosis? I mean, what is the goal? Or if you want to say, I want to create some uncertainty, regarding my regarding my economic relations with the rest of the world. I think Trump administration achieved that goal, but I don't think that's his goal. And if you want to decouple the U.S. from with China or with other major manufacturing country, that's opened the possibility. I don't know if we'll continue the same since we already have this, at least a ceasefire. But I mean, it opened that opportunity, so opened that possibility. So everyone are thinking about that if China and the U.S. are going to decouple permanently. I mean, then it may, according to Trump administration, they want to create job. They want to bring the manufacturing sector back to the U.S. Can this tariff therapy be effective? So far, I don't think so. I still don't understand why this can bring back the manufacturing sector to the U.S., particularly when you see this lower tariff with China and the further negotiation with China. Probably, if we are fortunate enough, probably our tariff will further be lower. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it can go down to the level before let's say January 20th. I don't think so, but probably it will be much lower than 145%.
Right.
So I don't think that's very effective. So it's a little bit chaotic, I will say.
You're suggesting what exactly is the end game, right? What is exactly is the goal? If the goal is going to be the goal that has been described as rhetorics we heard over the months and probably years, firstly. And secondly, once there are real goals, whether there are real solutions to those goals and whether tariff is anyway part of that solution at all. Yeah.
We feel the shock, but I don't think that's a therapy.
Very interesting. Professor Quelch.
President Trump has a number of constituencies that he has to address. The Trump loyalists are very much concerned about jobs in the United States and manufacturing jobs in particular. And so a part of the rhetoric here is definitely to address them. At the same time, there is a large and formidable business constituency that was well represented in Geneva, by the way, by the Secretary of the Treasury and the U.S. Trade Representative. These people represent the business interests of America. President Trump always likes to have several different points of view in one ear or the other, and then make decisions based on incoming opinions that are very, very different in many cases. So what the end game is, that is always a question mark with President Trump. That is, according to his advocates, one of his great strategic sources of brilliance. And according to most others, it's a sign of weakness, uncertainty that provokes poor confidence or lack of confidence and roils the markets.
Do you see the latest rhetorical wars almost, at least crossfire, in the international media, among think tanks, in the public sphere, likely to have an impact on the next stage of decision-making of the current White House?
One of the challenges we have is people in these kind of situations these days tend to want to declare victory. Who won? Who lost? This is not the path to resolution of these very important and detailed issues. There has to be a large number of people behind the scenes on all sides. And I don't say just China or the US, I say all sides because many other countries are affected here. The way to make progress in these kind of situations is for experts who know the numbers to be able to negotiate intelligently and without public pressure behind the scenes, and then a good win-win result will occur. Unfortunately, in the current environment, there's a tendency for one side to declare that they won, and that simply provokes the other side to have to declare that they won. And you end up in a vicious spiral of self-congratulatory rhetoric that leads to no permanent solution.
How do you see China is digesting right now or dealing with the so-called loss and winning issue? Who is the winner, who is the loser, so to speak?
China is winning. Yeah. Why? Because China, start from April 2nd, China insists on symmetric treatment for tariffs. If the US raise tariffs, China will follow. And the US insists to raise the tariff of 34%, China should not retaliate. If China retaliated, China did that actually, then the tariff escalated. So now China retaliated as a 34, and then the tariff go back to 34%. So the insist on symmetric treatment for China side is successful. So I think on that issue, China is winning. Second of all, I think US is winning as well, because market teach them go back to rational. Their imagination to immediately change tariff system, manufacturing system, it's just not realistic. Market actually speaks out very loudly. Yeah, so then, well, welcome, Mr. Trump, go back to real world. That's kind of my wish. I wish he will keep in that path. And tariff changing is not playing cards. It affects the real world. If you treat tariff changing as playing cards, everybody lost. Everyone will lose from it.
I think the official position, we always say there will be no winner in this trade war. I truly agree with that argument. But if you follow the social media in China after this Geneva talk, I think a lot of commentators, a lot of social media users basically believe this is a kind of victory of China, because they think that's kind of, what we achieved is a little bit beyond people's expectation. So they think that some people say, Trump administration, at the beginning raised a very high bar, then suddenly withdrew. So this kind of thing, I think that's quite popular view among some Chinese. But of course, this are not. I don't think this is a official position, and I don't think it necessarily reflects the academia. But on social media, it's loudly.
Right.
It's quite loud. What I want to say, there are different views. So we are still digesting, as you said, we are still digesting this outcome. So it's put it in a more serious way. I will say it's still too early, because as we discussed, there are still 24% tariff there just be postponed for 90 days. It could come back, and there are another 20% tariff on the so-called fentanyl issue. It could be there forever. I mean, it's still too high. I mean, now today the U.S. tariff on China is still more than 50%. That's too high for the bilateral trade, and also then a very bad implication for the bilateral economic ties.
Right.
So it's still too early to say, it's a victory or it's something else. Yeah.
Just one additional point, if I may. there had been a lot of discussion of trade deals with Japan, trade deals with Korea, trade deals with India. None of these have emerged. I think it has to be said that China's steadfastness, apparent steadfastness on display in Geneva has probably aided considerably the negotiating fortitude of these other countries that were supposedly going to be very quickly toppled by the Trump tariff threat. So China, in a sense, has done everybody else a favor by being fairly tough and steadfast in its position.
What is this end game for China when it comes to China-U.S. relations?
For decades, I mean, China and the U.S. have, we have developed a kind of economic ties. I mean, China has been integrated into international, I will say, neoliberal or liberal international economic system. China's economy for a very long time was not pure market economy, but we reform our system gradually and try to integrate into that. And in that process,
and open up.
I mean, China has been, open, and China be welcomed by the U.S. and by the West. But then China become very large. So then you have two choices. I mean, one is your domestic economic system become completely the same with the Western country or with the United States, and then you stay in the integrated market, integrated economic system, or you stay with your own system, then the whole system break up. I think, to be honest, I think we are facing these choices. You can hardly maintain your current domestic economic system while at the same time try to, make the whole, try to maintain the whole international economic system still intact as in the past 3 decades or 4 decades. So I think the end game depends on what do we choose and what does the U.S. and other players, how do we choose the end game? Reform yourself further, or watching this international economic system kind of break up, at least to some extent. I don't know what is our choice.
After 1945, the global trade system is largely a multilateral trade system, from GATT to WTO. After April 2nd this year, this multilateral trade system is largely changed. So in my view, so now we are in a process towards a new trade system. So that we hope, it's our deep hope, this new trade system actually will help these, especially small countries. This GATT and multilateral trade system is really helpful for developing countries, for small countries. But now, U.S. is playing a monopoly, try to say maximize U.S. profit, U.S. benefit. Where will this global trade system go? What would be a new trade architecture? That really people are concerned. So in my view, right now we see the target for the U.S. is try to strategically decouple from China, number one. Number two, they want to make their manufacturers strong again. Number three, they wanted to make a reform this global trade system. But even themselves don't know what kind of a global trade system will be. So for China, I think will just still try very hard to insist these WTO principles. But at the same time, we have to react the U.S. move, try to build up a healthy and mutually beneficial trade system. But how far we can go, I guess we are waiting to see.
Even about 90 days, we're going to see short term for the next couple of days, 1 or 2 weeks, or 90 days, 3 months from now. not to mention longer term. What are some of the benchmarks you're going to watch very closely in order to figure out whether the two sides will be able to work as they had in reaching a consensus in Geneva?
We will be watching for the tea leaves, the indications of additional behind-the-scenes meetings, and I think that the understanding is clear that if there is not a drip feed of good news over the course of the 90 days, if we go, say, 75 days without any word of progress, the markets will respond, as has been suggested, respond negatively. And I don't think that the administration in Washington wants to take another round of that.
Short-term benchmark, what will be 2 weeks? Whether these the commodities, the made in China products will be largely short in Walmart, in other places. I really don't know if these agreements it's soon enough to reduce the market panic on this shortage of the goods. So in 2 weeks, we will see. We'll see how market will react to that. So being the first target would be smoothly transit to a relatively stable of the good markets. That would be the first thing. The second of all, two sides would go to the detailed agreements on these tariffs, on this trade, and hopefully they can proceed and have some agreements on this.
If we can continue to hear the news about our very busy officials from the two sides, I mean, if they will make a telephone call to each other, if they will meet somewhere somewhere maybe in Geneva again, I think if we can continue to hear that kind of, no matter it's a rumor or it's a news, confirm the news, I think that will be good. If everything just keeps silent, I will tend out to be more pessimistic.
Very interesting. What an interesting time, I have to say, professors. And thank you so much for your insights with your decades of research and also background. Da Wei, Yu Jiandong, last but not least, John Quelch. Appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.